Sonic Frontiers has been the most anxious I've ever been for a mainline Sonic game. And quite honestly, I don't know when I've been this anxious for a mainline Sonic game like this. I know during the Dark Ages I was a dumb kid during that time, so I didn't know that these games that were coming out during that time, most people considered to be not that good. And during the meta era, I definitely had very strong opinions about games that came out during that time. Well, in this case right here with Sonic Frontiers, I just want to get the game in my hands and actually try it out for myself. I think that's part of the reason why I kind of push for the idea of having a public demo for people to play. And we'll definitely talk more about that as we talk through the game itself. But for now, we'll talk about the open world itself, the combat, customization, cyberspace, and also I'm going to talk about some of the past videos I made in the past. Some that you can actually watch right now, and some you can't. So let's dive right in. So let's talk about the open world. I definitely like the idea of this is going to be a wide area that you can go on and explore at your own free will. Anything's possible of how you can traverse through the world. And there's all these puzzles you can do, there's these collectibles as well. And there's enemies you can go up and face. We'll talk more about the combat later, but in terms of the exploration of the open world, while the imagination goes wild of what you can do in the open world, I still wish Sega should have showed more of the open world itself, show us more about what you can do in the open world. Are there NPCs you can talk to that can initiate side quests? Is it really just Amy, Tails, and Knuckles that you can go on and talk to? Is there more than just the puzzles and the exploration and the combat in the open world? Those are things I definitely want to know more about, and I kind of wish Sega should have been more upfront and open about what you can do in this open world rather than just saying, oh, we want you to be surprised when you play through the game. And quite honestly, that would have worked a lot better if there was more trust in Sonic Team. But that's not the case right there. There's very little trust after the release of Forces, and definitely with me, even though I'm very intrigued in this game, subconsciously after how I felt about Forces, it's definitely hampering my excitement for this game, that I can't be fully excited like many people are. And that gets into my video I made back in June where I made the statement that Sega should release a demo for Sonic Frontiers, and I still feel very strongly about that opinion that Sega should release a public demo. Because quite honestly, if they did, it would have quelled a lot of issues people had with the marketing of Frontiers and whether or not they would have been excited for this upcoming release. But it is what it is. Sega has chosen to only have demos available in expos that are outside of America, and that's the commitment they made. But let's move on to combat. Combat is definitely the most interesting thing I've seen so far about Sonic Frontiers. The fact that there's a skill tree involved where you can learn brand new moves, and there's a lot of ways you can go about facing the enemies, kind of similar to Sonic Unleashed, where you can either button mash or you can learn the interesting combos to essentially do better in each battle. Definitely the most interesting thing of Sonic Frontiers. Parrying looks interesting, dodging looks fluid. So the combat is definitely not as fluid as a Platinum Games kind of game or a Capcom game like Devil May Cry, but definitely is kind of meeting itself in the middle of something like that. My only critique would be the fact that I wish we would have seen more of the enemy combat or the patterns that the enemies have when going up against Sonic. Because we kind of seen mostly the same thing when it comes down to the enemies, of how they shield up and how they attack Sonic, in terms of the tells that Sonic have, and everything kind of seems very similar to one another, I would have to say. Though that kind of gets back to my point of Sega should have been more upfront about this game rather than shrouding it in mystery or anything. But that's just my own take right there. But let's move on to the boss battles, which the boss battles have definitely been the most dynamic I've seen for a Sonic game in quite a while. Because before in the Boost Sonic games, it's mostly just been boosting the enemy does an attack, you dodge the enemy's attacks, and then you hit them either by a homing attack or boosting through him. Though Forces admittedly did something interesting where they had these arena style battles, though it didn't really do much with it. It kind of just plastered Sonic into an arena and that's about it. While here in Frontiers, there's definitely a lot more going on with each of the battles. One, you climb up the Titan, and then you hit him on his little head things. Another instance, you're in an arena and you're trying to push the enemy into the electric arena. And another one, you're grinding on rails and you're trying to make a full circle to attack the enemy. And another one is kind of like a boost game where you're kind of dodging the enemies and hitting him when you get close to him. There's definitely a lot more variety in the boss battles, which is kind of just what I've been asking for. Show us that variety itself. And they definitely did that with the boss battles, which kind of wish they kind of did that for everything else about the game they're showcasing. Moving on, let's talk about the customization, because this is something also I wish they should have shown us more about. because obviously there is indeed customization in this game. You can get the soap shoes, you can get the Monster Hunter outfit as DLC. You can also get these gloves and boots if you pre-order the digital deluxe version. And you can get these shoes that's in collaboration with Kurome, the VTuber girl, I think. And this is something I wish they should have told us more about. Is it more than just these little collaborations that you can get as DLC, or can you actually get customizable items within the game by unlocking them in the game? Because as a sucker for customization, that would be nice to know if there's all these things you can go on and collect and put it on Sonic, rather than being this on and off kind of thing and only really mentioning the customizable items if you get a digital deluxe version or if you sign up for a newsletter or DLC and what have you. And again, it kind of goes back to the whole thing of Sega being more upfront about this game, more open about what's in this game. But it is what it is again. Though, let's kind of get to a little bit of some negatives that I want to bring up, and that's of course cyberspace, which it's kind of been the most unappealing thing I've seen about the game, and for multitude of reasons. Of course, the reused level themes again, the fact that they kind of just look like Forces levels essentially, and also the big elephant in the room that these are basically reused level designs from past Sonic games. The first one being from Unleashed, the other one also from Unleashed, and then there's some from Generations and what have you. It's kind of disappointing that Sega kind of chose to just rehash level designs from past Sonic games rather than creating more interesting, newer designs. And I know there's cyberspace levels that use new designs, but for the most part it sounds like it's mostly using older level designs from past Sonic games. And on top of that, Sonic's control based on what people have played in the demo definitely seems to be the case that Sonic controls worse than he did in Sonic Forces, which is another issue right there, and it definitely comes to the case of Sonic Team not understanding the critiques people made when they were talking about Sonic Forces and why Sonic Forces was not that good of a game. And for the fact that they're also adding in multiple pathways within these cyberspace levels, it doesn't really seem that interesting when it comes down to the multiple pathways. Because usually a multiple pathway usually means one pathway is either faster than the other, or they give you more rewards for taking the tougher path. And here, I don't really see enough to say whether or not these multiple paths give you a satisfying reward. There's more I can talk about the cyberspace. Definitely it's not the best thing that they've shown off about this game, and it's kind of the case of just hopefully you get the game in your hands and you experience it yourself, and then you can make a full opinion on cyberspace itself. Now let's move on to the graphics and music of the game. So let's start with graphics. Obviously they're using Hedgehog Engine 2 for this game. They're pushing it to the fullest of its limits, and also the fact that they're also releasing this game on Nintendo Switch. So there's a lot of pop-in within this game, and the game also runs at 30 frames per second, not only on Nintendo Switch, but on PS4 and OG Xbox One, which was confirmed during Tokyo Game Show. Definitely this is what I wanted to see from Sonic Team and Sega, that they're trying to push the graphics of Sonic the Hedgehog again, even if it meant compromising 60 frames per second. And I know for most people want that 60 frames per second experience, but quite honestly, ever since the HD era of Sonic the Hedgehog, aside from Sonic Forces, most of the Sonic games ran at 30 frames per second. So I'm glad to see Sega once again pushing graphical fidelity once again for the next Sonic game and pushing Hedgehog Engine 2 to its fullest limits. Though I kind of noticed that the engine itself is definitely being pushed, even for things that it's not meant to do, because I assumed Hedgehog Engine 2 was meant for that more linear design of Sonic the Hedgehog, but of course when they decided to go with an open world experience for Sonic Frontiers, they were trying to make the engine work with something it was not meant to do, and they're trying to really push it to its full potential and all. And you can definitely see it for yourself with all the pop-in and the fact that the last gen versions run at 30 frames per second. And that's for the music. Tomoyo Otani is back in the composer seat for this game right here. And I'm kind of mixed with the music. For one was the open world music. It's going back to that style of music I wanted to hear from Otani, with that more instrumental music, less of that synthesized music and all. And definitely I felt that Otani fitted more with that kind of style of music, because at the end of the day, some of the best tracks from Otani have been from Sonic Unleashed and Sonic Lost World, OSTs that actually use real instruments. And the weaker soundtracks have been stuff from Sonic Forces, where it was more synthesized, more of that EDM style, stuff that he's not fully accustomed to and trying to force himself to be accustomed to. And that's kind of the case right there with the cyberspace levels. The stuff I've heard from the cyberspace levels, it's basically similar thoughts to what I had with Sonic Forces, where it's basically this EDM style again, this trap style music, and it's not really clicking well with his style of composing. There's some songs I think are alright, but for the most part, I just don't really like this kind of style from Otani, and I kind of wish he kind of stuck with the more instrumental style. incoming transmission from the future, because I quite honestly forgot to mention the 2 vocal songs, I'm Here and Vandalize. So let's start with I'm Here. Definitely this is more so of the usual kind of music we're used to when it comes down to Sonic music. Nothing too much to say about that. I thought it was a good song overall. The lyrics were pretty nice. But the one I was more interested in was Vandalize by One OK Rock. This is a Japanese rock band that has English vocals in their songs, and they were essentially signed on by Sega to have one of their songs, Vandalize, be included in Sonic Frontiers. And it's a very interesting song, primarily just because there's a uncut version of the song where they basically just F-bomb in one of the lyrics. I think the lyrics are really good, and just the style itself is just so different to what you're used with Sonic the Hedgehog, probably because this was not actually meant to be a song for Sonic the Hedgehog. Sega just signed on with One OK Rock to have the song be in the game. But overall, those are my thoughts on the 2 songs. I'm Here is basically what you expect, and Vandalize is such an intriguing song overall. So I've talked about mostly everything I want to talk about this game. I know there's a story right there, but quite honestly, I don't want to talk about it yet until I actually play it for myself. But let's talk about a video I've made, and I made a video called 3 things Sonic Team should do in the future. And I'm not going to bring up one of the points, quite honestly, because I've changed my opinion on that said point. So we're not going to bring that up, but I'm going to bring up the 2 points I made in that video itself. So one of the points I made was that Sonic Team should have a change of conventions, essentially looking at what Zelda did to become more popular with Breath of the Wild, Ubisoft has done, and of course looking at Mario, of what he did with Mario Odyssey. And quite honestly, looking at Sonic Frontiers, they definitely have looked at other games and seen what Sonic could be more of. Change certain things that Sonic is normally accustomed to and be something completely different, because obviously things need to evolve, things need to change, and they're looking into that. So they went with this open world approach. Though they're kind of clinging to the past with the cyberspace stuff, hopefully with the next Sonic game they kind of just go full sprint with the open world idea, maybe just not do the cyberspace stuff, and think of new ideas to fully evolve the Blue Blur. So quite honestly, I think they've done the first point I've made really well. And the second point I made was that they need to actually understand the critiques people are making about Sonic games, fully understand why people are making said critiques, and why this is such a prominent thing that people are talking about. Because the main reason that I made that point is because Sonic Team does listen to critiques, but at the same time, when you look at the changes they make, you can tell they don't fully understand why people are making these said critiques about a particular point. And quite honestly, looking at Frontiers and looking at what they've changed in Frontiers, it does seem like they still don't fully understand these said critiques people are making about Sonic games, especially with Sonic Forces. Sonic Forces level were basically just straight lines, so they added in multiple pathways, but quite honestly, they don't really understand why people want multiple pathways. People want more control of Sonic, so they kind of give you more control of Sonic in cyberspace, but not as much as people really want. At the end of the day, this is something I still think Sonic Team needs to work on, because this is still their biggest Achilles heel when it comes down to it, of not understanding the critiques people are making. But they still kind of understand certain critiques, because the open world, they've given you so much customization of how Sonic controls. So they're working on understanding critiques, but they need to understand more quickly, because this is their biggest issue so far. And before we end today's video, I want to bring up a poll I made in my community tab, which update to you guys, I actually now have a community tab. Thank you guys so much for the support, and I'll be posting there almost every day. And I asked the question whether or not you guys were going to get the game physical, digital, or digital deluxe. And most of you guys are planning to get the physical version out of the 7 people that voted in that poll. As for me, I'm planning to get the base digital version because I'm getting this game on Steam. And I got that one for 10 bucks cheap, thank you Wario64 for that link. And I'm definitely looking forward to this game, but at the same time I still have my reservations towards this game. And hopefully when the game comes out, I'm left satisfied playing through the game, and I'll probably be live streaming through the game as well. But anyways, what do you guys think about Sonic Frontiers? I'd like to hear them in the comments down below. Plus, don't forget to subscribe as well, and leave a like on the video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you guys on the next one. Take care.